You're listening to PARTNERNOMICS podcast, where we discuss the art and science of developing successful strategic partnerships. To learn more about the suite of PARTNERNOMICS solutions, visit PARTNERNOMICS.com.
Welcome back to another episode of PARTNERNOMICS podcast. I'm your host, Mark Brigman, and today we have Mr. Greg Unruh with us. Greg, how are you doing, sir?
Hey, Mark. I'm doing fantastic. Yourself?
Good, man. So Greg is a partnering professional, partnering expert, and he has a ton of knowledge, a lot of different parts of strategic partnerships, but specifically within sales types of partnerships, whether we're talking referrals or channels or all the kind of different, splits and divides and ways that those morph. That's where he spent pretty much all of his career. And so I'm really looking forward to having Greg come on and share some of his insights with us. So thank you, sir. Appreciate it, Greg.
Hey, looking forward to it, Mark. This is one of my favorite topics, as you know.
Absolutely. So Greg, what we had talked about is putting together a podcast and just sharing some insights with folks about, sales specific partnerships. And, obviously there's lots of different types of partnerships, marketing partnerships, technology partnerships, and then obviously sales and, there's just dozens and dozens of different types of partnerships, but we wanted to hone in specifically on partnering for sales. And so if you would, I'd love for you to just kind of grab the mic and talk about how you view partnerships for sales and kind of where it all starts.
Well, Mark, at the highest level, partnerships in the context of sales is just another lead gen vehicle. So a lot of times a sales organization, outside of having a partnering program or a channel, will have a inside sales or an SDR team, and they're dedicated to, just pound the phones, 60, 70, 80, 100 calls a day, looking for that lead, looking for that opportunity. And, for those companies that really want to strategically scale and grow their business, they really need to implement and deploy a channel program, which the results are the same. The objective, we're trying to generate leads and interest in our product or service through by empowering and engaging partners. And those partners could be referral partners, could be channel partners, could be alliance partners, which are kind of like referral partners, but non-monetized. There's just a very complementary alignment. And we can get into some of the weeds of where we kind of align the different resources on both sides as we get into the conversation here. But at the end of the day, it's really about how do we bring mutual value to one another. It's got to be a two-way street. I think that's really important. But the end goal is, how do we drive leads to one another? How do we feed those leads to the sales organization? And how do you incorporate your existing sales organization into into this kind of partner channel structure? Some companies have, completely dedicated channel organization and resources that are dedicated to that. Others, particularly a smaller organization, may not have the resources for that. So you have to, creatively integrate the channel into the existing resources, which predominantly are going to be your inside, outside sales executives, and really kind of coach and train and mentor them into managing those relationships at a deal level. So there's a big difference between the different roles and what the assignments are and kind of who plays what. But, we can back that up a little bit. I'm already getting into the weeds. But I think there's a lot of stuff that has to happen all the way up at the executive level before you even go down this path.
Absolutely. Just like we were chatting about is it really has to start with the executives. And just to give people a little frame of reference, what we're going to do is we're going to do two different podcasts. We're going to do this part one that's going to be focused on how to launch generically, we'll call it a channel strategy or a channel partnership program. But just know that we kind of mean that all encompassing that goes beyond a pure channel. It's going to also include some referrals or basically any other type of sales partnerships. And then we're going to do a follow-up. We're going to do a part 2 where we're going to discuss the actual implementation and the actual operationalization of the function itself to just give people a map of where we're going to go. So Greg, yeah, so we were chatting about, or you had mentioned, really it starts at the top with the executives and getting that executive sponsorship. Let's chat a little bit about the importance of that, and really what are some landmines that you've seen happen over your career on that topic?
Yeah, so I think at the executive level, it's really important to get their buy-in. And when I say buy-in, it's not, I think that they understand that if they want to scale and grow, the force multiplier is a channel that makes, sense to everybody. However, there's a lot of moving parts to that, and you have to set and make sure they set the expectations and make sure they understand those expectations before you launch into this effort. Because if you're not aligned at that highest level, it is destined to fail at some point, on the journey that you're going down. And so, setting those expectations there's a lot of foundational kind of operational components that you need to put in place before you're ever really going to start to see the returns on this strategy, on this investment. And so I try to set that expectation that, listen, this may take a good 12 to 24 months, but I think really a good 12 months, you could really have a lot of these pieces in place and start seeing the fruits of the labor, if you will. But I think a lot of times what happens when you have misalignment at the executive level, it's easy to get that buy-in on the front end, but it's a continual reinforcement to the other areas of the company that we are committed to this strategy. This is our path forward, and to have that continual reinforcement, not just because I think what happens, and this is just my experience, is very easy to get an executive excited about growing and scaling their business and driving revenue through a partner channel. That all sounds great, and then I think what naturally happens is oftentimes, okay, we've agreed to do this, and now the delegation powers come into play, and they kind of step aside and entrust that the others are going to kind of do that. And really that is never going to work. You always have to have that continual reinforcement from the executive level that we are on track. This is a continual long-term strategic initiative for us to grow and scale our company through a channel, and to have that constant reinforcement. And part of the reason behind that, Mark, is, and you and I know this well, you have to have somebody that leads that channel initiative, that partnering initiative. However, that individual doesn't really, it kind of sits in the middle of all of the departmental organizations within a company. So you've got sales, you have marketing, you have sales operations, you have even support. You may tap into support for some other things that we can get into here in a moment. But in that role, that partner development manager really doesn't have any kind of authoritative control over any one of those departments, teams, or individuals. It's all purely influence. And this is why it is so extremely important to have that continual reinforcement from the executive level. They really kind of are your ambassador and your microphone to the other departments when you need to execute on certain things to move the initiative forward.
Yeah, and Greg, you'd mentioned, buy-in. I think you absolutely have to have buy-in, but for me, it's almost like a step further where there's like a true sponsorship where the executives, they have to want it, they have to own it, they have to stay engaged, they have to continue to push, because as you and I know, this partnering thing, especially whenever you're standing up this function for the first time, it's a long-term play. As you mentioned, it's at least 12 months before you get, solid ROI. Sometimes, more complicated programs could take, as you mentioned, 18 to 24 months. And so it's staying focused, but it's not only, having the executives, quote unquote, kind of willing to do this, but they actually want it. They need it. It's a part of the corporate growth strategy.
Yeah, agreed. And probably the biggest challenge you have, particularly if you're coming from, a direct sales organization where there's never been a channel, you're standing this up new. That might, and I hate using this term, I'm going to use it anyway. The mindset can oftentimes be almost coin operated, where you are, as a sales rep, you're getting leads fed to you through either sourcing them on your own, receiving them from a marketing efforts, receiving them from inside sales or an SDR team, and you're just going through in a very transactional way and trying to get those leads. Now, the challenge with a lot of that, and getting into some of the details of it, is those conversion rates are really low. So it's purely a numbers game, but highly transactional. And if the culture of a company is kind of in that mindset and has always been in that mindset, this is a big pivot, because there's a lot of things. There's going to be a big effort to go out and kind of stand this channel program up. But when you're in the mindset of kind of this transactional, high velocity type of mode that a lot of direct sales organizations are in, and filling that pipeline and then executing on that pipeline, when it comes to a channel and kind of getting that thing going, getting that engine started, if you will, it's going to take time. It's going to take, like I said, I don't like to set an expectation that you're going to see meaningful results, for at least 12 months. Now, you might get some incremental or what I call reactive opportunities, along the way as you're building this, but to really where it's fully executing and running on all cylinders, I look at probably a 12-month minimum kind of runway to get that going. Well, that's a really tough pill to swallow when you come from a highly transactional, high velocity sales environment that, where are the leads? What's the process? And there's so many things that you have to put in place to ensure the success of the program. There's two components to it. When you put the foundation together, now you have to go out and you have to find those partners. But once you find those partners, I've always said, I think that's the easy part. The more challenging part, and this will probably be part of the next podcast, is how do you operationalize and make those partners successful so that it's working, you're working together in a collaborative way. That's where the real work begins. But there's a lot of foundational components that you have to put in place before you even start recruiting those partners. The worst thing that can possibly happen to you is you're not prepared. You go out and you start recruiting partners. You think you have a channel program because you hired somebody and you have some basic understanding of it. But if you don't have the right pieces in place to really maintain, manage, and support that partner, it's probably not going to be successful, and you're going to just continually struggle. So it's really important to put the time in on the front end, get all those pieces in place so that when you do begin to bring those partners on, those partners can be successful. And your success is dependent on their success. And so that's why I put so much emphasis on this readiness, is what I like to call it, phase of standing up a partner or channel program.
Yeah, no question. Well, I love the point that you bring out is, a lot of times in a traditional direct sales approach, maybe our success rate on leads or going after different companies, different opportunities may only be, let's say, 1 to 5%. Like you said, it's a numbers game. We're making our 60, 70, 80, 100 calls a day and just, pushing people down that funnel. But the power that can come through partnerships on the sales side is leveraging those relationships and just leveraging more knowledge and more history of our partners and using that as an accelerator. So instead of a 1 or 2%, maybe we're at 40%.
Yeah, and it's funny you say 40%, because in my experience, and having done this multiple times with multiple companies, when you begin to get that partner engine, fully revved up, you do see that, and when I say conversion, I'm talking about a conversion, a lead coming from a partner that gets converted to an opportunity. And then there's a conversion of an opportunity that goes to a closed won status. And that's where we all want to get to. But the first part of that journey is just getting qualified leads. Are they qualified? Because a lot of times in that direct sales model, highly transactional, like you said, it's definitely a numbers game. You're sifting through a lot of noise to get to that, that single digit conversion rate. Whereas if you train and you get a partner and give them the right tools, the right resources, put all the pieces in place that need to be there for their success, when you get that lead from that partner, they've already pre-qualified it, or should have. And if you've set it up right, you will have qualified leads coming in. And that conversion rate statistically is, north of 40% oftentimes.
Yeah. Greg, I really liked what you had mentioned about, setting up the foundation. Take some time and set it up right. And so many times, I've worked with clients. I know you work with different companies and stuff yourself. Whenever you go in and stand these up, that a lot of times the approach is, well, let's just get in and then we'll figure it out. Man, doesn't it pay dividends to set this up correctly and then launch when you're ready, as opposed to trying to weld the ship, as they say, as we're sailing it?
It does. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of patience to do that. But, my approach when I come in and I get hired in to do an engagement and stand up a program, I will typically come in at a very high level. I look at past state, current state, and what is our future state? What are we trying to achieve? What are the goals? And this typically happens at that executive level. And so when I look at past state, I try to look back at the last, 2-3 years and try to get some sort of measure of what the trends have been from a growth strategy specific to sales. Understand what that is, and then I'll look at the current state. How are we trending today? And then I look, where do we want to get to? What is the objective of this? What do we think we can achieve here if we integrate a channel or a partner program into this mix? And part of that comes in, once you understand that, then I start to peel the onion back a little bit, and I want to look at all the little details operationally. Okay, what CRM did they use? They use Salesforce. They use Dynamics. How is that structured? How is that set up? What type of changes do we need to do to make sure that we can, support a channel program? And part of that, and that's a really important piece of this, Mark, is having the technology and the operational pieces in place. Because one of my biggest thing in channel, and I'm jumping around here a little bit, but the death pill for a channel is channel conflict. And channel conflict happens by not having proper processes and tools and workflows in place to manage, if you have multiple partners, to make sure partners aren't stepping on top of one another. And, if you go out and just start recruiting partners and you haven't laid this foundation, you haven't put those pieces together, you haven't thought through that, what's going to happen inevitably is you're going to have partners that you're going to have channel conflict, and then you're going to get in this conflict of who gets the deal. Or do you have to do a split commission? I mean, it just gets messy, and you can avoid all of that by taking the upfront time to look at the operational processes, the workflows. You have the technology platform to ensure that you have all of those bases covered. And at that point, now when you start bringing on those partners, that they're going to be really an extension of your sales team. When you start bringing them on, they have the resources, you have training, you have processes. The optics of that make you look, certainly that you're have a mature partner program, that you've thought this through. You're not just winging it, so to speak. So really, really important pieces to the puzzle there.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, channel conflict, man, how many times do we hear that? I know that all the clients that I work with, it seems like that is one of the first questions or one of the first topics that we discuss. And you and I will definitely hit that one on our follow-up whenever we talk about the operations. But Greg, I'd like for you to just speak for a couple minutes about culture and specifically the shift, right? So these organizations that are traditionally just direct sales, and then now they decide they want to make the shift and they want to leverage the power of partnership. So they want to stand up this partnering program to help with sales, but really partnering is a culture, and it's going to, you have to have the culture that is set for partnering. I'd like for you to talk for just a couple minutes about how that partnering culture impacts or how it needs to be a piece of the culture in order for it to be successful.
Such an important piece of this. So typically what happens, some of the pieces at the very high level, the top maybe three important things that you need to do is we talked about the executive endorsement, sponsorship, and just continual reinforcement of the strategy, just to give confidence throughout the organization. And so the organization understands that's part of setting the culture, that it's coming from the top down. The next part is there's a difference between managing the partnership and managing the deals. That's a whole different mindset. And so where I'm going with that is a lot of times I will come in and I will manage, I'll help set up all the structure and process. I'll manage the partnerships, go out and recruit, bring on the partners. But what I try to do, and this is part of the culture, and I'll typically talk to the sales leaders within the organization, if it's a VP of sales or maybe the executives, just whoever that leader is, say, listen, they don't know it yet, but I am just incrementally and over time, some of these account executives are going to kind of morph into kind of a hybrid role where they're going to be, they're still going to be the account executives, still have their quotas and do their direct business, the stuff that they do day to day anyway. But then as they get leads that come in through partners, I deploy what I call a role-based partner mapping strategy. So I have account executive to account executive, manager to manager, executive to executive, and I begin to create these layers of role-based mapping between the company and the said partner. And what happens is, me as a partner manager, I will go in and I'll manage the kind of the macro strategy of the partnership, kind of be the conductor of that relationship. But then I facilitate, and this is a big part of culture, is I'll facilitate those role-based mapping. So if I have an account executive, that, hey, I'm going to pair you with an account executive with this partner and that account executive may have anywhere up to 15 to 20 different pairings. But over time, what they find is, wow, in to develop a relationship with that paired partner account executive, and those leads coming in, have a higher conversion rate. Over time, you find that the account executives become very, very integrated into the overall partner strategy or channel strategy, just because they begin to see greater results with higher success rates. But culture is a huge part of it.
Yeah, as part of our framework, as you know, the strategic partner leadership model, our results elements, we talk a lot about the different imperatives for standing up new partnering teams, whether it's sales or other types of partnership functions. But one of those components, actually component number 5 that we share, and that is understanding or planning for supplemental resources. Like whenever we stand up these teams or a strategic partnering function, a strategic partnering team for the first time, again, regardless of what types of partnerships they're going to manage, the resources that team is going to need, it goes beyond just what their salaries are going to be, right? PRMs, partner relationship management systems, and other research and development tools, there's a lot of things that can go into making this successful. That's beyond just having well-trained, real smart industry experts in partnering. Love for you to chat a little bit about some of those resources and just making sure that we equip those teams to be successful.
Yeah, that's a really important part to that, Mark. And one of the areas that it's tied into this, but I kind of skipped over it, and I think it's really important. And it kind of goes back to that expectations. And it's really just and I touched on it a little bit, but sometimes the executives are always looking at this from the mindset of, okay, how many leads is this going to drive me? How is this going to fill my pipeline, and what's the conversion rate? What's this going to mean long term? But they also have to be willing and invested in understanding and identifying with the right partners. Because if it's just, hey, I'm a taker, I only want to receive leads. But it's really important that you invest in the partnerships as well, and you have the training and you have the education of, here's what this partner does. This is what their core value is. Here's their solution. So you can begin to train those resources on your sales team to also be looking for those partner opportunities and throw some leads back their way. That's how it begins to reciprocate. But all of that behavior, that pattern of behavior between exchanging leads between one another, don't just be a taker, you got to be a giver. But in doing that, it takes a lot of internal training, mentoring, investment, and commitment from the executive side. I've worked with companies in the past that we have no interest in selling partner solutions. We only want to receive, leads. And, to me, that's a failed strategy. I think that it's not that you want to pitch a partner solution. There's a difference between making that a part of your core offering and going out and proactively pitching that, as opposed to training all of your different sales resources. And it's not just the front line. It could be your customer success team, that train them on the partner solutions, the partners we brought into the ecosystem, so they understand what those are and can listen for those pain points. And as soon as you start throwing a few leads back to your partners that you brought on board, what you'll find is those leads will come back to you twofold. And so it's the culture and the whole setting up that entire ecosystem. It takes time to do that. And it takes a lot of coaching and mentoring at the individual level to make sure everyone is just kind of rowing in the same direction. Like I said, you've got inside sales, you got outside direct sales folks, you've got customer success, you got customer support. All of those different teams and individuals within those teams, it's important they understand and they're part of this entire kind of channel strategy because it's important to the overall success of those partnerships.
Man, so many awesome things that you've said in there. I think it's one of the things that I definitely see whenever people are launching new programs is, and you alluded to this, is it's natural for us to have kind of this transactional, quota-driven, get results today, kind of crank on this traditional sales approach. But whenever we're doing it, leveraging partnerships, we're shifting the way that we're kind of adding this new lever, and this new lever is absolutely different. And as you had mentioned, partnerships are. It's a relationship between people from different companies, and there's value that's provided to them, or value that can be provided to them in multiple ways. And those, we want our partners to fight hard for us. Well, in order to get that, we have to be willing to fight hard for them. And it's setting up this symbiotic relationship, and it's different. It's different than the way that traditional companies, traditional sales, only approaches attack business, and that's definitely one of the things that I see.
It's funny you say that, because one of the biggest pushbacks I get at an individual sales contributor is, man, I don't have time in my day to dedicate 10 or 15% of my activity to to supporting my partners. I've got to make 100 calls. I've got to get these conversions. They're so dialed in on that. And if you run the numbers, I'm kind of a data guy, so it's very easy for me to kind of prove this out to them that, okay, you run those numbers, you get your 1 or 2% conversion rate. Let's take that 10% out. So you lower your direct activities and then transfer some of that energy into supporting your partner pairings in my case. What you'll find is the results at the end of that exercise, you're going to far exceed what you would have done on the direct side. It's just the numbers are the numbers. And it's very easy to show that to them, but sometimes I have to break it down in black and white and and show it to them in a spreadsheet that here's what we're asking and here's what the results are, but you have to be committed to it. You can't fall into it's really important that you maintain that level of engagement. And this is probably one of the biggest things I have to train. A direct sales rep, they are going out and they're developing a very short-term relationship. They're looking for a company that wants to do business with them and whatever the solution they're trying to pitch. So they go out and they develop that relationship. And as soon as they get to that closed one, they close the book, they hand it off to someone else, and then they're on to the next deal. This is a very different type of relationship because what I'm asking them to do, I'm not asking them to go out and establish a relationship with a paired partner rep. And then as soon as you get a deal, you walk on and get another one and you move on to the next. It's not transactional that way. It's developing a long-term relationship. And, I coach the little things. I say, get to know their family, their kids, what college they went to. I mean, develop a relationship, get to know them at a personal level. And as you do that, now you become top of mind. And kind of my, from a sales perspective, I always tell them my competitive juices really fall into, I always say this in the channel world, if you're not top of mind, somebody else is. So this is where you need to get competitive and stay top of mind with that paired partner account executive that you've been assigned with. Put operationally, put a weekly or biweekly cadence, put it on the calendar, make sure you're having that touch point, make sure that you're having things to talk about and discuss, and develop that rapport. Because what you'll find once you do, and this is a really big cultural shift, kind of going back to what we were talking about. That's not really how some of the somebody that's coming out of a high velocity, highly transactional sales culture, that might be a little bit of a pivot for them to fall into this kind of nurturing type of mindset. But what they'll find if they invest the time and energy and take the coaching to do that, they'll find their results they'll be far greater in the end.
I'd trade 2% for the 40%. I want the 40. Give me the 40.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, man, thank you so much for your time. And it's going to be fun knocking out the part 2. I mean, I'm more of an operations guy, so I'm definitely looking forward to hitting part 2 of this conversation where we can talk about how we operationalize these sales partnerships. Yeah,
for sure. Everything we talked about is kind of what happens, that's kind of seeing, the results. But for all that to happen, man, there's so much operational components and processes and workflows and infrastructure and technology and resources. We'll have fun on that conversation. There's a lot to unpack there.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of PARTNERNOMICS Podcast. We'll see you next time.
PARTNERNOMICS Podcast is brought to you by PARTNERNOMICS. Learn how to leverage the power of partnership. To listen to more episodes of PARTNERNOMICS Podcast, visit PARTNERNOMICS.com.